to the Wellbeing Show. I'm Noel, I'm your host, and I'm joined this evening by the amazing Georgie Twamley, who will introduce herself, and I'll introduce her properly soon. I should just point out that we may have technical problems tonight because I managed to give my techie, my producer James, a heart attack I've literally only just stepped in after having to go to the loo, and he's sort of in a puddle of terror on the floor at the moment. So maybe he'll pick himself up, maybe he won't. We probably won't notice, actually. He's that useless. So he could die in the background and we wouldn't notice, to be honest. Anyway, it is a live show, which I've just proven to James by deciding that I needed a call of nature. And so that means you can join us if you'd like to. It'd be great to hear from you. We're sort of streaming on several social media platforms at the moment, and on Periscope, which I have to admit, I don't actually know what that is. I know it's connected with Twitter somehow, but I don't think I've ever seen a Periscope except the sort of that you get in submarines. That's the only Periscope I know of. At my age, I think I'm doing quite well. We're also on YouTube, which I do know what that is, because my boy watches it obsessively at the age of 10. So I'm sort of having to drag him off of it on a regular basis. And also we're on Facebook Live, so it'd be lovely to hear from you, or you can give us a call. Send us a WhatsApp on +44 7506 319 745. That's +44 7506 319 745. Anyway, enough of that. On to Georgie. Hello, Georgie. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you on. I'm just going to jump in there and make the obvious statement. You sound a little bit Irish to me.
You sound a little bit Irish to me, Noel. Yes, I'm originally from... Just a little bit. I'm originally from Dublin, Ireland, but currently living in London.
Yeah, it's a very Dublin accent. I mean, people don't really realise what a Dublin accent is. My mum was from Dublin, so she had it. And
does she sound like
myself and my father have exactly the same name, Noel Daniel McDermott. You can't get much more Irish than that, really. And when my mum was annoyed, she would use our full name. It would be Noel Daniel McDermott. And both of us would just like go.
So how did you know which one was which?
That's right. So
you just always thought you were both in trouble.
That's absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, my dad named me after him. He got very excited because he'd had 3 girls by then, and then I was the first boy that came along, and he was like, right, give him everything, my name, everything.
I love him. We should call him the same as me.
That's right, exactly. Everybody says to me, why are you called Noel? Were you born at Christmas? No, I'm Irish. Loads of people get called Noel. That's the way it is. And I'm Noel because...
Well, my background's kind of as a fashion designer, and I've worked in a number of different places in London and in New York. And now I've come back and I'm doing my master's in entrepreneurship and innovation. So kind of a still fashiony, but taking a slightly new route. And I've been working on my passion project, which I'm developing, called Helping Yourself, which hopefully we'll get plenty of chance to chat about this evening.
We will, very much so. And you're also somebody who has lived experience of psychological distress and mental health issues. And it's for that whole combination of you that we've asked you on the show this evening. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about that as well.
That's
and sort
right,
of demystify
absolutely.
This whole thing.
Yeah.
You said you were sort of watching Johnny, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago. You were very touched by him and his story.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Yeah. It's amazing. He was so honest about his experiences, and this crazy story of someone stopping him commit suicide basically on a bridge, and then him launching a campaign on the internet to find them and finding them despite having thought the name was wrong. But very inspiring. And as we were just mentioning before, I just think it's so important for people at every stage, from recovery to ongoing anxiety to sort of pretty good quality of life, but sometimes finding things a bit challenging, to start to address that and really kind of look after our mental wellness, look after our mental health, just like we look after our dental health.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going through a big, long process around my teeth at the moment, so that really resonates with me. I'm having them straightened.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
that
I
was
hope I
one of
haven't
my
triggered you.
no, 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 not at all, not at all. A lot of my friends say, "Why are you bothering?" I'm sort of like, I've tried to have braces since I was a kid, but my dentist refused to do it. I've had to have
No way.
various extractions over the years, and I now have enough space in which to move my teeth around. So I've had those clear aligners on, which are, it's quite amusing being in my 50s and wearing braces. It's a sort of interesting experience.
Yeah, well, I
All the
had
young
them.
people that I know are going, when I pull them out and clean them. Oh, I remember all of that. You know, they're all going
They're wondering
laughing
if
at me.
you're okay.
Yes, quite. Sort of, at some point, they may actually be my teeth. You know, like,
Too much.
as opposed to just aligners. But there you go. But you're, you know, clearly, you know, you don't fit the perceived or received idea of what somebody who has psychological stress or a history of mental illness should be like. I don't think you sort of you don't see, you're a young, successful entrepreneur, female, etc. And yet you have quite a you've had quite a lot of challenges around your
Definitely.
mental health, and also in particular around the responses of mental health services to you. Do you mind if we just go back a little bit, if that's all right, into, you know, your growing up in Ireland and what that was like? Because we were talking about it on the phone the other week, and because of the generational difference, my experience of Dublin was very different to yours. You live in the Dublin as it is now, which is,
Yeah,
I have to say, one of the most amazing cities you'll ever visit. I mean,
yeah.
it's absolutely gorgeous. Like the I'm trying to remember that Temple Bar, which now is a place of destination where loads of drunk English people go.
Very
You
chic.
know, literally, when I was a kid, I remember going through Temple Bar, and it was the red light district. It was not pleasant at all, and you would scuffle through. I remember, sort of as a little kid, holding onto my mum's hand, and she would drag us through as quickly as possible to get to the halfpenny bridge, and be able to go across the Liffey. But now it's Dublin and Ireland is very different. So, what was it like for you growing up in Ireland? I mean, sort of, you know, what was your experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was very positive. I think, you know, Ireland, and when you think about Ireland and the UK and the North and the Troubles, you know, it can seem quite complex. But for me, growing up in Dublin, I had like a pretty sheltered, in a way, like pretty happy life. Like wasn't really wanting for anything, went to great schools, have a good family, and haven't moved around much. I lived in one house until I was 7, and then we moved to a different house, and we've been there ever since. It's still my family home where they are now. And yeah, I've always had a really positive experience of Dublin. Lots of great nights out, although I don't frequent Temple Bar. But Dublin's great. Like, we always talk about it at Christmas. Everyone does go out in the same kind of area. So we just call the center of the city town. And so when you go to town, you know, it's about 1 kilometer squared. So you're going to bump into your friends, especially around Christmas. You'll see everyone you know.
Yeah. That's lovely, and Dublin itself is a really lovely place in general, and that part of Ireland, because you're not far from the coast, and you can get there, and sort of that side of Dublin is slightly drier than the other side of Ireland, so, just a little bit, but
Yeah.
the west of Ireland, of course, is a wash.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the north and stuff like that, and it's interesting, I think, that people think of it, and indeed they are technically 2 separate countries, but also they're not. That there isn't the same sort of border issues that there used to be, and people just go backwards and forwards and have strong connections in both directions these days.
Definitely.
It's a very peaceful place, and I guess that just sets it up so that we understand that, you know, it's not necessarily somebody's childhood that leads to having psychological distress later on. It can sort of happen to anybody, and that's why it's really important to think about it. So, do you mind talking a little bit about the distress, when it started to happen, what was the responses to you, and what your experiences were, if that's okay.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, like, I don't really present like someone might expect. And I think that's so important to kind of really open up the conversation about publicly. And hopefully, I think mental health is becoming more accessible in the future, and becoming part of more of an everyday conversation instead of a hidden conversation. Because certainly I've identified at times with this kind of phrase of like a high functioning, so someone who's high functioning, but also maybe anxious or having a hard time in the background. And sometimes that's fantastic because it's a coping mechanism and it's a life will go on. And sometimes that's not healthy because it's a brave face when actually you need to say, I'm having a hard day. Could you help me? I actually can't go to what's on this evening. This is too much for me. So, I think it's great to really open up all these conversations about all the millions of ways that, we do have to look after our mental health and our mental wellness, and where it might be good and not so good, and the millions of experiences that are happening.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really important that we have these conversations so that we normalize these experiences.
Yeah.
Those of us that have suffered psychological distress and will suffer psychological stress are in the majority. We're the normal.
Yeah.
Sort of, we are the norm when it comes down to it. And this fantasy that you can live a life and it not touch you in hurtful ways is nonsense. It's not true.
Totally.
It's not true. And so it doesn't make any sense to me that people would live in that type of psychological bubble, and that they wouldn't want to really learn from the experience of people who've had this distress, who found things that work for them. So looking back, when do you think the sort of distress started to happen for you? And you probably hadn't been educated into noticing the signs particularly, I imagine.
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny that you ask about childhood, and it's like, I can't pinpoint like, oh, that event happened or anything like that. But, I think there was signs that I had a sense of. Sometimes I was fine and sometimes I would get really upset. And we know more about trying to educate kids about feelings now, but, I didn't know what it was. I couldn't describe my feelings, but I knew sometimes I would get upset and I felt like I couldn't get calm again, and those kind of things. And funny, I like speaking on a radio show. I remember years ago being in the kitchen and hearing something about children's emotions and if they're not okay and what to do about it in mental health. And I remember hearing it and thinking, I feel like there's something in that, like kind of identifying with that. And that must have been, maybe I was like 12, something like that. But I was mostly fine. And then more when I was into my late teenage years, the challenges started to seem a bit more obvious, and I started to have to seek some help through school counselors, and then outside school counselors and different things. I was still really highly functioning, but actually really needing help. And that kind of went on during college, and I had different times where I was more okay and a bit less okay, and then I kind of got really okay for a long time, and then I started to need a bit more help again. And so that has been kind of like a transition. But I mean, speaking about how people, it's beneficial to talk about and how we can all learn from it, I'm really grateful. Like the skills that I've learned in learning how to manage my emotions, harness routine to make sure I'm getting what I want from life, do really well. They've helped me like perform better than I think I ever would have in jobs, in relationships, in my communication, in so many areas of my life. So yeah, it really is important to talk about, and the benefits of it in a way of really harnessing your mental wellness.
Well, what you're talking about from my perspective is what I call the social model of these things, because I think there's still a dominant view that mental illness is some sort of chemical distortion in your brain. It's your chemistry, and you need somebody medical to come in and reconfigure the chemistry with potions and tablets and things like that. And certainly medication is involved for many people and is extraordinarily helpful. But actually the way you're describing it is much closer, I think, to the truth of it, which is that it's about the relationship to self and others and life, and understanding myself enough so that I make sure I'm in a healthy relationship to me, to others, and to my life. Yeah. And then I think the next statement is then obvious, isn't it? When you're sort of really in touch with what your needs are and making sure you support yourself properly, you're obviously going to perform better. Even when you're
Totally.
ill, you're going to perform better.
Totally.
And when you're not ill, you're going to
100%.
perform amazingly, aren't you? So it
100%.
absolutely makes sense. So it's also interesting, and I think it's relevant for people listening at the moment, that the way you describe your psychological distress is that it came on slowly in fits and bursts. So again, I think people imagine that you were well and then were ill.
Yeah.
And something else. It doesn't really work that way. It is much more in the way you describe it, I think, that we begin to notice certain difficulties, which you just think are normal, and then they get a bit more difficult, and then they get a bit more difficult, and then it's not normal, then it's a problem,
Yeah.
What was the response to you when you were sort of seeking help at that sort of younger age, as a teenager? And I mean, you're not old now, so,
I'm definitely not a teenager anymore.
Sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I hope that like people's experiences will kind of improve, and it'll become more part of the school system model. I mean, I've mostly had relatively positive experiences, but looking back, I probably started off getting bit more help, and actually I probably needed a lot more help pretty fast, and who knows what might have made a difference. But it was kind of like, oh well, maybe you could have a chat to this person, as opposed to like, you don't have to go to school this week if you're not okay. I pretty much didn't miss a day of school, which was great in a way for me. It was a coping mechanism, but also now I hope that I have the skills that, like, if I need a day off, I can take it. And speaking about people being high functioning, even if they're, and it actually being beneficial even if they're sick now, hopefully, like if I have employees in the future, actually having someone who can come to you and say, I'm having a really anxious day, that's a beneficial employee who's honest, who's open, and can maybe say, I'm going to work a half day, I'm going to be all over, I'm going to get this stuff done, I'm going to go home, take care of myself, and I'm back here tomorrow and I'll be on the ball. And that's like all the way to motivation, it really is a skill set.
Yes, I think I agree. The evidence is with you as well, that if you support people who have challenges and struggles periodically, they are much more motivated and loyal as employees, to be honest. And I do sort of have a team of people that I pay to sort of do work for me, and that's very much the basis on which we work, which is that it's an expectation I have that they will look after themselves, because I absolutely do not want people nailing themselves to a cross in the name of a job. It's just of no interest to me whatsoever,
Those days are over. And the hiding days are over. I mean, speaking of Ireland, the statistics, now I haven't checked it in the last week, but the statistics there were that in all the countries in the world, Ireland was the number one country where anxiety is Googled. It's number one. So are we not talking about it, but we're Googling it? Or is it a huge issue there? It raised a lot of questions about, can we be more open with each other instead of just with Google,
Well, I mean, I think my memory of Ireland, I don't know if it's true still, but certainly sort of mental illness was a very stigmatized issue. And also it was linked often to judgments about moral corruption, and that sort of, there was certainly, and I'm significantly older than you, but there was the interventions of religious beliefs about where illness came from, and it was a visitation, and it meant you'd done something wrong or sinned in some way. So that hopefully and thankfully I think has gone. But still, I imagine there's quite a bit of stigma and shame around these issues.
And I think the younger generation are probably really changing things in Ireland. The young generation have done amazing things, and gay rights votes and abortion voting, and I really do believe in that society in terms of their power to make change. But stigma and shame are so powerful, even if society, you know, you're not really addressing the subconscious of society. But if you've kind of been having a hard time, you got better again, and now you're feeling worse again, even the shame you feel alone at home, not mentioning it to anyone, just when you thought you had a
Yeah.
handle on it, you know, it's a complex issue.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also bigger than one country. So
Yeah.
currently, when you think about, there are three high-profile women of colour that have said very clearly that they've stopped doing something because it was interfering with their mental wellness and their well-being. And Meghan Markle, the Japanese tennis player, and more recently the British girl, who is Canadian but British. I don't know how that works, but there you go. Who stepped out of the match at Wembley. Now, what's interesting for me is all three of those women were pilloried and attacked by certain sectors of society, and in particular, it was sort of fat old white blokes sort of had a go at them and have done so consistently. And it's the same fat old white blokes that have attacked all three of them. And I say white because all these ladies are women of colour as well. So that's an added issue going on. But if you think about Meghan, what she said was, this job being in the royal family is making me want to kill myself. I'm going to stop doing it. Okay, but that's advice I'd give to anybody. If you're doing something that makes you want to kill yourself, stop doing it. Right? The same with the Japanese woman whose name I can't remember, but the tennis player said, look, I can't do all of that. I can do this bit if you want me to, but I can't do that bit as well because that's just too anxiety provoking for me. And then everybody went, no, you're contracted to do all of this. And then there's a 19-year-old girl who had the presence of mind to go, she didn't call it this, but she was describing a panic attack. But I had the presence of mind to go, no, my health is more important than me soldiering on in this. All three of them, I think, are absolute heroines of mine at the moment. I
Totally. And hopefully that's you know, the beginning of real change and the beginning of how media does have to address how they do deal with it and show respect and support for people, and that these institutions have to show support, and especially when it comes to mentions of suicide, because it is so serious, and there's people listening at every moment that are having a hard day. Guaranteed, there's just no denying it. So, you know, showing that support, showing that hope, and saying people are here for you is always important.
And as we're raising these issues, and I know that you were concerned about this, I'm concerned about them as well. So if people are listening, they're getting triggered. Remember, there is lots of help out there. You're not alone. You're really not alone. And we'll put up some helpline numbers. So one of the great organisations to turn to are the Samaritans. They're absolutely extraordinary, available in the UK and Ireland and around the world as well. And they're 24/7 free telephone service. And again, we'll put the phone numbers up. In fact, it's the same phone number for the UK and for Ireland as well. So do reach out. Don't sit in silence, folks. If you get any message at all from this evening, it's reach out for help and keep reaching out for help until you get the help that works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, you reached out for help. You got quite a lot of positive help, I think, Georgie, but there was a point at which it stopped being very helpful. Do you mind talking about that a bit?
Definitely.
Because we talked about that on the phone last week, or earlier this week. Was it earlier this week?
Yeah. Earlier this week, yes. Totally. And I think that's what I'm really passionate about. And we're going to talk about helping yourself and kind of like saying my kind of feeling is that because there's always more help, there's always more hope. And my experience was that some things worked for me, some things didn't. And some things that I thought might have helped didn't help. Some things that worked the previous year didn't work the following year. Then those things might have worked again the year after that. And so this was not a linear process, and there's not one clear answer. but there is actually so many solutions out there, and there's a million different approaches. Just like, you know, everyone's experience is unique. You can kind of create your own system for what's going to work for you, and then that system might not work, and then you try again and you keep going, and you learn to flow with it, and you learn to take care of yourself in that way. And I think that's what's so important, because my heart kind of breaks to think of people who maybe try and reach out and it doesn't quite work, and then they kind of go, well, maybe this is my life, you know, it's a bit struggly, but here we are. But actually it can improve, and when things really do improve, you go, thank God I gave it that time, thank God I tried something else. Because as I mentioned to you on the phone, I was originally, well, not originally, but after various challenges, doctors kind of diagnosed me as being treatment resistant after trying a number of things that didn't work.
It's a damning,
like, yeah,
it's a really damning diagnosis.
I mean, I had great people work with me that, you know, I didn't take it to heart, but I do think that, you know, there's going to be things that don't work. Just like we don't always click with everyone in life, just like you might sit down at the therapist's office and it's not the right vibe. But as Jen, who works with you, would say, screw it. Like you can make any choice you want. And like, that's so important. Like there's so much out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're describing is what I call help-seeking behavior.
Yeah.
And fundamentally what I teach everybody, I mean, I used to be social services manager working with vulnerable children, and we would teach children, because you can't protect people from life and you can't actually protect children from life, but what you can do is teach people that if something is uncomfortable, if something feels wrong, go and ask for help, and keep asking for help until you get the help that you need, or rather you get the help that works for you. Don't ever give up on that. And it's that help seeking which ultimately will make you well. The specific set of things, and you're very good at not at sort of keeping it broad in that way, of sort of going, well, look, maybe it's the tailor in you, or the clothes designer in you. You have to make that set of clothes for yourself.
Yeah.
Even if you take an off-the-shelf thing such as CBT or medication, you're still going to have to take it in a little bit and maybe add your own bits to it and change the buttons or repair the buttons at some point, etc., etc., etc. You're going to have to tailor that set of clothes to fit yourself, not somebody else. And that's what I hear you saying. And it seems to me to be connected to this capacity you have to design, think about things creatively.
It's definitely, I think, creative, because I think what I've been doing with helping yourself kind of combines my creativity and then my passion for mental wellness, and to kind of create what I needed, because what I was receiving at the time was not working. And so kind of researching things myself was really important.
Tell me about help yourself, as we're at that subject now.
Yeah.
What is that? What sort of, you were inspired to set up a wellness program. I'm always fascinated by, you know, there's some people choose, okay, I'm well now, that's enough, I don't want to think about it, I want to move on and get on with my life. Some people don't get well, unfortunately, they give up. Not they give up, but the obstacles are too challenging or too difficult, or life takes over in some way. Some people like yourself, you go, that was a really interesting experience, I want to do something with it. I want to transform that negative into something else. But, you know, where do you think you got that from, that sense of which, I'm going to transform this, I'm not going to let it define me, I'm going to sort of work with it and offer it out? Where does that come from? Because you're also an entrepreneur, which is, I think, the same energy.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, to be honest, there's not one clear answer, because I wouldn't say like I'm done now. I think in some ways, maybe when I have continued to have a hard time, I think, well, fuck it, I'm gonna put all this information together, maybe it'll help someone else. I remember thinking, if this just helps one person, it'll all be worth it. And so here we are. Then at other times I've thought, well, let's put some meaning behind this. You know, let's give value to it. So created Helping Yourself, helpingyourself.co.uk, which is currently a website, and it's also an entrepreneurial project. So if people want to follow it on Instagram, you can kind of watch us grow, because there's a lot of great things coming kind of over the next year. So it's a home of mental wellness online, a digital mental wellness platform full of mental wellness tips, built on the idea that there's loads of ways to feel better. So it's about combining everything else that's already out there. So professional advice from experts, but also personal experiences, people talking about what they've been through, how they got through it, and providing a frame of reference for hope and for change in people's lives. So yeah, it's currently a website, potentially going to be an app in the future, and it's a hub. So at the heart of it is strategic partnerships. So partnering with Suicide Awareness Northern Ireland, partnering with hopefully some other charities, hosting panel discussions, and looking at how we can kind of bring together a lot of the different solutions that are out there, so that whether you're wondering what's the difference between counseling and psychotherapy, or how do I find a therapist, or am I depressed? Is there like something you could check? Putting it all together in a way that's really digestible. And as you said, like demystifying it, just normalizing it, making it lighthearted, making it beautiful to look at, and taking this playful, chilled approach to addressing what's on your mind.
Great. I mean, it really is needed, because I think that largely at the fault of people like me, the idea of mental health has become this really dire, dreadful thing. I've got mental health, and we say it like we claim, well, shouldn't that be a good thing that you got mental health? You know,
I know.
if somebody says I've got physical health, we go, great, well done. Health is, but of course we know that because of idiots like me, mental health now means you're ill. For some
I'm
bizarre
sure you've
reason.
helped a lot of people, Noel. I'm sure you've helped a lot of people. But it's true. One of my friends said to me, when you picture mental health, you picture a leaflet you get in the doctor's office with someone holding their head in their hands. And when I do the research, the amount of articles that are out there, they're like, oh yeah, we can illustrate this clearly with your head held in your hands.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's that thing as well. I mean, I think there's something about being well and well-being and having genuine mental health, is that it is more than just the absence of symptoms, for goodness sake.
Exactly. Yeah.
We don't get well just to go, oh, phew, I'm not having a panic attack now. That's great. My life's fine. It isn't. It's about, well, what do I now do with my life? And that's what I'm intrigued by you, is that you seem to have that energy. And I'm wondering where that comes from within you.
Yeah, well, hopefully also Helping Yourself is going to give people an opportunity to share their stories and give meaning to their experiences, and kind of get value from their experiences by sharing. And that, you know, kind of in some ways maybe makes it all a little bit more worthwhile, and some of the struggles. But where do I get the energy?
So it's the idea that people... Yeah, I'm just thinking, you seem to, you've been one of those people that does transform and change and sort of look at what you can do with stuff, sort of a natural leader, as it were. So it's the idea that this website will grow into a space in which people can have dialogue with each other, sort of an online space as well. That's sort of almost like a social media.
Yeah, at the moment it's in the comments, and in the future, hopefully it's going to be much more social. We're going to build a personal login, and you can communicate with other people, and we're going to have like little programs you can do, like resilience and motivation, and you can be working on them, definitely. And I think, to answer your question, I think having had some really hard times, really, really dark times, that then when I was really well, or when I have felt like I'm on top of my game, and actually I know what I'm doing, and I know how I can handle it when a challenge comes up, then I've been like, well, let's make the most of it. Like, I'm not gonna say it's a shitty day because it's raining, because I know what a shitty day is like, and this is not it, you know. So like, let's go for it. And then other times, you know, I don't have that energy that day, but when I can, I definitely feel motivated to try and make the best out of life, because I've known what it's like to not have the best quality of life.
So what I'm going to do now is go to a space and discuss a space that we were going to discuss at the beginning, but I just wanted to jump into a conversation with you. And also, I want to go into this bit of conversation because there is an important point to be made about it. Now, obviously, this last year to 18 months, going on 18 months now, has been an odd time, a challenging time, a frightening time, an inspirational time, and all sorts of, but it's been out of the ordinary, whatever
Yeah.
one's individual experience has been. How have you been experiencing the pandemic and the lockdowns and things like that?
Yeah, it's an important question. I think it must, really be affecting way more people than we even realize. Like, it's everyone, and it's people who don't mention it and people who seem okay. Um, I mean, I'm doing pretty good now, but at the start of the lockdown, I had planned to move to London, where I am now, in spring 2020, 1st of April. And mid-March 2020 definitely got in the way of that. And I'd had kind of a rough time, maybe the prior Christmas, and was kind of getting back on my feet, and feeling like I'm getting my life back on track. And then it kind of got knocked off the rails again. Now, logistically in my life, I lived at home, I was, doing okay, but my mental health was not that good, and I was definitely struggling with anxiety, and found it incredibly challenging, and definitely questioned the opportunities that were going to come in my life. And trying to maintain that hope while also recognizing the reality of the situation was incredibly challenging. And yeah, I definitely find it really hard at times, more towards the start, and I think I've slowly improved as the time has gone on. But it has been a long time, and isolation is a strong word. Like, there's a lot of people who are lonely out there.
Yeah, and just thinking, if you can imagine what this period of time would have been like for you as somebody who suffers with anxiety, if you hadn't learned how to manage it effectively, how much worse do you think it would have been?
I wouldn't like to answer that, no.
Yeah,
Is the honest question. Like, I mean,
yeah,
thankfully I have an amazing therapist. I have an amazing therapist in Ireland, who I went to years ago and then could go back to, and I have great support. But if there's people that don't have support, or they haven't found the person that they click with, and those people aren't okay, and as has been mentioned on other podcasts, some of those people are on waiting lists. Um, which is hard.
yeah,
But it also does come back to the point that there is a lot you can do for yourself from the comfort of your home,
yeah,
balancing.
yeah,
I say all this with a pinch of salt. There's also going to be people that they can't, that's too much for them. And I've been there before too. But, when you can, a little bit, increments, tiny increments, you
yeah.
can make a
I,
change.
I think if I remember back to my days when I was locked into being ill, rather than sort of working actively on being well, which is how I think about it these days. I don't think
Love
I'm
that.
well or ill or anything like that. I'm either working towards improving my situation or I'm not. And some days I'm not. Some days I stay in bed, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's fine. But generally, I have a recovery approach these days to my own struggles. But certainly my experience was last year when the pandemic started and the lockdown started, I went, I have vulnerabilities that I understand, and I'm going to protect myself in a special way because of my vulnerabilities. Because I don't have any sort of ego about it. I don't sort of need to
That's
pretend that
fantastic.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
And so I just went, right, what's my emergency action plan? I have this sort of fire alarm plan for myself. If my fire alarm goes off, I go straight into my extra support and all that sort of stuff. And so my fire alarm went off and I got all my extra support. Do you have something similar? Were you like, okay, I'm struggling. These are the things that work for me. What were the things that you put in place that sort of shored you up, as it were?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sounds like you have a great system. Maybe you could share it with me, and we could put it on helping yourself, and we could help some others with it. That sounds
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
I mean, I
absolutely.
I do and I
Yeah,
don't. I don't think I have it to that kind of extent. I have, I think talk therapy is what's really been always beneficial for me, and that's my main thing. And then my
yeah.
doctor was kind of aware, and certainly my family and stuff like that. But no, I don't have a clear leveled system, so I'll have to create one. That'll
Yeah.
be my homework this evening.
That's fine. I mean, I teach my patients this, so
Yeah.
because the assumption is that you're sort of, if you've had these vulnerabilities in the past and present circumstances press those buttons, those vulnerabilities might emerge, and so it just makes sense to start supporting yourself in particular ways. And I sort of knew. I know what my vulnerabilities are. I don't have any embarrassment about them these days. I
That's great.
prefer I prefer sort of not going into the deep dark hole anymore. That's all I can say, because it's a big climb. If
Feels
I can
better to
stay
feel
out of
good.
that depth, that's fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've got a question that's come in,
Oh, great.
and it's up to you how you might want to field this. But any advice for people who are just not feeling themselves since the COVID restrictions? Do you think they might need mental health support? Are there things that they might do, things that you might be able to advise them?
That's a great question. Will I answer and then you answer?
You answer, yeah, definitely. I
Okay.
don't think
Okay.
anybody's interested in my opinion, but
Yeah.
you're the star of the show, Georgie.
Well, I love that because I think so many people are in that place, and that's what I really care about, is that in between time, that gap between I'm having a bad day, but maybe I'm not quite bad enough to seek professional help.
Yeah,
And that's what's so important. And it's kind of like you said about the levels. So it's a great place to start and go, maybe I feel a bit vulnerable, but I'm not sure. So maybe it's like, maybe I'll have a word with my doctor and say, we'll check in again in 6 weeks. Or maybe I'll try going to a counselor and say, like, I know someone who did 4 or 6 sessions of counseling across the last 18 months, just, okay, we'll check in again in 6 weeks. Or if you think you're on the lighter side, maybe you're interested in picking up a couple of self-help books and starting some journaling and meditation apps. And if that doesn't work, then next level, then maybe you'd like to move to a counselor. So I think it's really important to be honest with yourself. Like, how can I look after myself better? This is a good thing. Oh, did that work? Yes, no. How can I look after myself better? This is great that I'm doing this, instead of being at home and feeling more and more vulnerable, kind of thinking, as you said, help seeking behavior. How can I take care of myself better?
yeah,
And it's always worth it.
yeah. And I like that description because for me, what you're saying is don't panic about it.
Yeah.
Try some stuff out. Recognize, trust your gut. You're not feeling well. Trust that.
Yeah.
Okay, notice it, be aware of it, that mindful stuff. That's interesting. I don't feel quite right. I don't know who would be feeling right at this point in the pandemic, to be honest. It's like, if you're feeling right for
Join the
something,
club.
really,
Welcome, listener.
absolutely. I've been feeling not quite right for some time.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's been about 29 years.
That's right. Absolutely spot on. But yeah, trust your gut. If you
Yeah,
feel like there's something wrong, there's something wrong.
yeah.
But
And it's
you,
a positive thing to get a bit of extra help.
it's also, I think, it's really important what you're saying about the stuff that you can do that is in the space between the SAS coming in through your window and dragging you off to a side, and you just sort of doing some self-help stuff. And also what I'm interested in is that when you're talking about self-help, you're not necessarily talking about excluding professional help. You might have a light touch response and use the professional help in a way that works for you. Now that's a really nice way of framing it, I think, Georgie. Is that how you do it with your own sort of personal therapy?
Yeah, I guess in a way it's something that I built because I was really okay. I thought I was cured, and then I started to need more help, and eventually did contact years later the psychotherapist that had helped me previously. But it's something that we've spoken about as kind of, for
Yeah.
me, I think it's the ideal, even if things are great in the future, to do a yearly check-in or something like that. And I do a lot of practices. I meditate every morning, I journal every morning, which, that's not for everyone, but that really helps me. And certainly at times when I've weaned myself off therapy, I'd like to think, okay, well, I'll pop back in 6 months, see how I am. And kind of keep an eye on myself,
Yeah.
just like you might do you know, with someone, a loved one that you'd want to keep an eye on if it was their physical health and it was something more obvious, just like we might do a follow-up check-in with a different kind of health issue.
It's interesting. I mean, because I explicitly talk to people about getting their MOT done on a regular basis, their mental health MOT. I'm a great fan. I'm a great fan of preventative work or well-being, you know, sort of mental fitness in the same way that we think of physical fitness. Like, it's interesting in physical fitness, for example, we all now understand that that one can be fit through doing regular exercise. And if you do that, that reduces the risk of being physically ill. It doesn't mean you will never be physically ill, but it does reduce the risk. And
looks like we've frozen there for a second. Hopefully.
Yes, we. It seems that.
Oh, it's just me. Well, we were actually joking earlier that I was going to host the show. So
yeah, now it's your chance.
Well, if you want to head off, that's fine. I can
Hello.
take it from here on out.
Hi, James. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear us?
Right. I'm back on then. I don't know what happened there. I dropped out. I can't see you, Georgie. Is your still on? There you are. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I'll have a chat with Matthew afterwards. He might have just downloaded a huge YouTube video which cuts us off. So we were just talking about this idea of, you know, mental fitness and preventative work, which it seems to me that that's what you're describing. Is
definitely
we have a phase. Let's call it treatment. We get treatment because we're ill, and then we've got the rest of our lives, haven't we? You know.
Totally.
And this idea of having a regular check-in, I love it. I'm a great fan of it. And I would sort of really recommend it. Also the idea of, and people don't think about this, and I'm really pleased to hear you say it, because I'm a great advocate of it, is having very short, brief therapy with somebody where you skill yourself up, get some skills, and then go off and live your life. And then you might come back and you might review that skill set.
Yeah.
And you know, just to make sure you've learnt it properly. I mean, I do that in terms of getting personal trainers, for example.
Yeah,
you know, I wouldn't dream of having a personal trainer for the whole of my life, but I go and see them.
Give me a plan.
That's right. I get on with it, and then I apply it myself.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing. It's the same thing. What's really lovely, though, is I think about mental fitness. Often, mental fitness is not the horrible, hard work. Mental fitness is often the really pleasant stuff that we really
inspiring.
Enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
And it surprises people. Yeah, go on.
And on that note, even just talking about, you know, checking in and stuff, I would just say add an extra layer of importance about that, which is every time you go and you check in and then you tell your sister or your best friend in work or your cousin, that's affecting society's opinion about how we deal with mental health or how we deal with a challenge. That they tell their mum, who actually tells their next door neighbor. And you know, that's community. That's how we look after ourselves better. And that's how we do start to change society's approach to mental health, by making it a more everyday, accessible, lighthearted. And that kind of thing is much easier to talk about than, you know, when someone's in the depths of despair.
Yeah. And your plan is obviously that you become successful in your business, it grows. And those are your hopes and dreams, and I'm sure you'll achieve them. I don't see why you wouldn't. You seem to have the umph to go and get it. Does it worry you at all, as somebody who, you know, you're one of the future leaders, you're going to be having some profile? Does it worry you at all that you discuss openly these issues?
Definitely. And I probably could be more open. And I hope that at some stage I will be, you know, I would like to maybe talk more in detail about my experience. But certainly I think there's so many people out there who don't want to mention it because a future employer might hear. And of course, we all want to work for people like you, Noel, who, you know, have a clear implication that they want to hear about an employee's challenges, and they can see that actually working through those challenges is an extra skill. But that's not always the case. And even, you know, if you're applying for a mortgage, does your mortgage broker Google you what comes up first? You know, you can't help but process those things. And of course, that kind of fear is what keeps stigma alive. So, you know, it is really important question. And I think really important maybe for me to just gently start to touch on it, you know?
I mean, I think it's real. I can tell you that it's a challenge to find medical insurance if you've got mental health issues. Because of we're lucky in the UK, we have the NHS, and so we don't need to worry about that. But
the NHS,
you know, it is a challenge because I'm private sector and I have extra insurance, and it took me quite a long time to find people that would insure me against certain types of illnesses, etc. So that's the truth, that's the reality. And so what I would say is it is a courageous step that you're making, still ploughing that furrow. And if we look at the fat old white blokes that had a go at these young women recently, they're still there, unfortunately. And those attitudes are still there, unfortunately.
Totally. But hopefully we'll be in the position to kind of gather our tribes around us and start to work and connect with and just function with the people who believe in us and what we do. And, you know, if we believe that what we're doing is right. And tides will change.
Because I guess if we don't speak out, we're in a sense condemning ourselves, aren't we?
And endangering others by implying that they shouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, I think the fat old white blokes will just have a heart attack and go away. So I think that's...
No comment.
I'm pretty much predicting that. I've seen their waist.
No comment.
So I'm pretty much predicting that's on the way, you know, in the same way that I pretty much think the orange monster is heading down that sort of that particular rabbit hole.
Well,
but it is interesting.
I can come. I hopefully can agree with you on that one.
So, well, I think it's pretty much guaranteed that the orange monster will, in a very short space of time, have managed to kill himself off. But it's really interesting.
Anyway. Yeah.
It's just crazy. But it's really interesting. I think we're on the cusp of something really important. So again, I come back to, if I think about somebody like Meghan Markle, which the strength of character it takes to say, no, I don't want this. This is destroying me. I don't want it for my kid. I don't want it for me. To turn to your partner and say, you know, I know this is your family and all that sort of stuff, but it's really messed up, mate. And it's making me feel like I want to kill myself. And then for him, Harry, to say, I don't want that to happen to you. Like, let's get out of this and we'll deal with the consequences of moving on. Now that's, even though there was a backlash from these idiots, the majority of people, I think, felt similar to what I'm saying is well done.
Especially after watching those interviews and watching them speak about it gracefully.
Yeah. And that feels on the cusp, as it were, that there's significant shifts going on when people can make these types of decisions where clearly they're putting their well-being first, but also they're letting go of, you know, millions of pounds of money that they were getting from the civil list and all this sort of stuff, and they're taking on more responsibility for themselves and earning their own living. You know, the Japanese tennis player was I felt very graceful at saying, no, I don't want to detract from this tournament. Fine, take the money. Not that interested, but I'm going to stay. And seeing people like that, and like yourself, you know, being courageous and opening up.
And yourself, of course,
and
too.
saying, but I mean, but it's easy for me. In some ways, it's it's easy for me because I work in the field. So
Yeah.
it's sort of expected, isn't it? I'm a therapist. That's the field I work in. If I'm, it's not going to hold me back. Nobody's going to sort of, the wounded healer is a standard trope in my field. So
Yeah.
that's no big deal. But I think for a young entrepreneur like yourself, it is an issue.
Yeah.
That it's real and it is a
vulnerable.
courageous stand. Yes, it's a courageous stand that you're making. And I think we should sort of value those courageous stands. And when people sort of put the spotlight on themselves, again, in a way that you have, which is a very graceful way. It has been, it's very sensitive and graceful. And again, I think that speaks to people who don't identify with the more outspoken and outrageous and out on the edge people who might be fantastic mental health advocates, but somebody who's just quietly getting on with their life, building their career in the same way as you, who might be very quietly sort of dying inside.
But it's also just like that question that came in. It's like, I'm not in hospital, but I feel really anxious, and I've had like mostly crap days this week. I feel just really crap, and that opens up the conversation, and that's where you catch it before it gets worse, and where you start to really take care of yourself and others. So that's important.
That term hitting a rock bottom.
Yeah.
There's no need to do that.
Yeah. I
mean, really isn't.
Sometimes some of us might want to hit it once or twice before we learn that.
That's the way I went, so I wouldn't recommend
no
it.
comment. But if you can learn from each other's stories, if you can address the fact that you've had a crap day, and instead of accepting it, kind of go, screw it, like let's do something a little different here and see what we can do. It can have a huge effect from taking you from quite bad and actually all the way to well and really, really well.
And also, I think what inspires me about your story and about you, there's a lot of things, but it's also trying to sort of encompass that is this program about wellness is something you're doing anyway for yourself and you want to share with other people, but it's not the whole of you. It's a thing that enables you to be you and the version of you that you want to be and get on with your life.
Yeah, and the version of me that thinks like maybe I'll have the skills to create any kind of life I want and be, make what I want in life happen, which are skills that I would never have, really considered if none of this had come up.
Yeah. Great. Listen, with that, we're actually at the end of the show, unfortunately.
Wow.
It always
you don't want to stay all night?
I know, it flies by, doesn't it? Every week it's the same.
Yeah.
Have we finished? Oh, hang on. But we are, unfortunately, at the end. Georgie, it's been lovely to sort of have you on this evening, and we'll think about maybe you come back and revisit, and
I'd love that.
See
Let's
where
keep
you're
in
at,
touch. Maybe we can collaborate.
Journey. Yeah, and definitely if you want some contribution to your website, drop me a line, of course. I'd be delighted to share things and help people, of course. So anytime. It's been lovely. You stay there, Georgia. I'm just going to wrap up and say goodbye to everybody else.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
It's been lovely to have you on. Thank you. So, folks, the wonderful Georgie Twamley, a great sort of mental wellness advocate of the new generation, I guess, and sort of just getting on with her life, but also in recovery. I mean, it's an extraordinary story, isn't it? So well done to you, and I hope that inspires people who are, as she says, in that space in between. Like I'm not bad enough yet, am I? But you don't need to be bad enough. You can start this wellness well before you're bad enough, at the point where you're still good enough, and it'd be really beneficial. So we're going to end there. I'll be back next week when I won't have grass growing out of my head. I might have something else, who knows. And it's been lovely to have Georgie on. It's been lovely to have you. I hope I didn't actually kill James just before the show. I didn't, because he has to turn the buttons off to stop us streaming. So hopefully that's what's going to happen. Lovely to have you all here, and thanks for your questions and comments. And see you all next week. Bye-bye.